Adonis. He's the chairman of Business in the Public Interest and has held senior legal positions at the FCC and in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's the author of the book, Doing Good, The New Rules of Corporate Responsibility. And of course, Adonis is a highly valued member of the Media Institute's Board of Trustees and First Amendment Advisory Council. So please give a warm welcome to our good friend, Adonis Hoffman.
Anticlimactic, I'm just a warm-up act. So I hope you guys had a wonderful Passover and Easter holiday. We're now in springtime in Washington, D.C., and as Rick mentioned, to kick off our springtime speaker series, we have a real leader in the industry, Perry Sook, who has over 38 years of professional experience in the television and radio broadcasting industries. He founded Nexstar in 1996 with a single station in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and has grown that organization to today one of the leading local marketing and content companies in the industry. Nexstar Media Group is the second largest local broadcast television operator in the U.S. with 174 stations reaching 100 markets. Those numbers may change if a few people in this room have anything to do with that over the next few months. That's not an official comment or endorsement, just an observation. Nexstar has annual revenue in excess of $2.4 billion, produces over 203,000 hours of local content. The digital properties also provide quite a bit of programming and support for audiences. Perry Sook serves today as, of course, chairman of the CBS Affiliates Board and the Ohio University Foundation Board. He's a member of the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB Broadcasters Foundation, and the TVB board, where he serves as chairman. He was named 2009 Broadcaster of the Year by Broadcasting and Cable magazine, was inducted in the Broadcasting Cable Hall of Fame in 2014, and of course received the Media Institute's 2016 American Horizon Award. He is truly a pioneer and leader in the industry. So in an industry of very, very important people, Perry Sook is one of the leaders. But you know, as you all know, it is nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And nice guys don't always finish last. And I'd like to introduce today one of the nicest guys in the industry, Perry Sook.
Thank you very much, Adonis, and thank all of you for having me here today. I brought a visual image and a visual aid that I thought I would share with you to get things started. This is my national ownership tab. So we'll leave that sit right there. The 78% on the front represents the compromise position that the NAB and members of the television board endorsed unanimously to the FCC. It also represents the status quo in terms of national ownership, as this has effectively been the law of the land since 2004, except for about 14 months under the Wheeler administration at the FCC. The 39% household reach, coupled with the UHF discount, means that no one has been able to have a national reach in excess of 78% in television since 2004. Nexstar and the NAB Television Board, its membership, as well as other TV broadcasters and groups, all collectively urge the FCC to clarify and codify this regulation as soon as possible. But I'd like to take this time today to make the case as to why even 78% doesn't go far enough to protect the existence of local television and local journalism. BIA recently produced a report that showed that all local revenue by media classification, and the report shows in 2019 Out of 16 categories of revenue in local television markets and local markets, local television will earn approximately 13% of that pie. Digital, made up of online, email, and mobile, will garner in excess of 30% of that pie, and that's this year. Our own internal survey recently showed that 47% of our local advertisers were buying time on Facebook Live in our local marketplaces. The point is that most of our regulatory agencies treat television as its own market, when in reality we compete against all of the other entities locally for shares of eyeball and share of revenue in our local market. And I would argue that it's in the national interest to foster and promote the local television industry, as our local journalism allows us to effectively compete against those unregulated entities, the behemoths that have unfettered access to 100% of the households in the US, not 39%, not even 78%. Local television broadcasters are required to disclose who buys our political ads. We are required to maintain safe harbors free of obscene and indecent content. When a woman committed suicide in a live stream on Facebook 2 years ago, the excuse was, well, it's the weekend, we didn't have the staff. Well, we as local television broadcasters don't get that pass, but then again, neither should they. So again, I believe it's in our national interest to allow a regulated industry such as local television broadcasting to compete on a level playing field, serving our video content, at least domestically, with those virtually unregulated companies that also do so. And I would offer this up also in the name of diversity and the necessity to maintain our diverse and local viewpoint in face of our unregulated competition. Failure to act before it's too late will bring dire consequences in my view, and we need to look no further than the newspaper industry to see what the future could bring. For a long time, and maybe for some still in this room, consolidation has been a dirty word. But I would encourage you to think about this and view this on a case-by-case basis. With the last 4 companies that we have bought, we've sold a total of 10 television stations to minority buyers, becoming the largest source of deal flow to minority owners in television since the turn of this century. But with the pending Tribune acquisition, Nexstar is currently up against the statutory national ownership cap of 39%, and we're unable to grow our footprint under our current regulations. As I committed to the MMTC 2 years ago, and I made good on that promise, if our industry is deregulated and Nexstar is allowed to grow, I again publicly commit to you that I will continue to create more opportunities for minority broadcasters and minority buyers as part of our future processes. With the Tribune acquisition, Nexstar will own or operate a total of 216 television stations in 118 markets. As you heard Adonis say, we currently produce over 203,000 hours a year of local news, and that number will grow dramatically with the addition of Tribune. I'm very proud of that fact, and everyone in our organization, from our board to our employees, takes the obligation to serve our communities very seriously. We've identified opportunities in every acquired Tribune market to create more local programming. The additional resources of the acquired stations will allow us to again expand our Washington, D.C. News Bureau, as well as fund and create additional news bureaus and state capitals across our footprint. Our growing size and scale will enable us to focus additional resources on serving our local markets. And that, by the way, is the business that we're in. Many have heard me before describe our business as a local service business, a simple local service business. We make our living by providing essential services to our local communities. We're in the business of creating and distributing relevant local content, primarily local news, talk, lifestyle shows, local sports, as well as localized emergency information. The second essential service that we provide is to help local businesses grow. Whether we're using over-the-air, online, a D1 or D2 channel, or mobile, social, or other local media assets in which we have invested, these are all tools in our toolbox to provide solutions and to facilitate B2C communications for local advertisers in the markets we serve. And like any other service business, we must invest back in our local communities if we want those communities to spend both time and money with us. I believe that the future of television is indeed local, and if we focus on our essential services and focus on serving our local communities, I'm confident that we'll be in business for a very long time, and it will be a good business to be in for decades to come, regardless of the technology we use to accomplish our mission. I was asked to talk about what excites me about the future of our business. Well, in a word, actually 3, it's 3.0. ATSC 3.0, or Next Generation Television, will allow broadcasters to offer a modernized viewing experience for our consumers, first and foremost, keeps us in the game. The IP platform that has the ability to bring together live and over-the-air programming with streaming content now in one hybrid experience. With it, we'll be able to enhance our core services to our viewers and our consumers and offer them a richer viewing experience. In addition, we think the advanced advertising features of 3.0 will enable broadcasters to offer advertisers new opportunities that we think will grow our ad revenues and their businesses. Longer term, we see a tremendous opportunity for broadcasters to participate in both the connected and autonomous auto industry with traditional video content, navigational aids, and other data casting services. The platform also has the ability to be compatible with future wireless networks, and it can be envisioned that, like Wi-Fi, the broadcast platform could serve as a synergistic service to future fixed wireless services and mobile handsets. The transition at this point is voluntary. It is hard, but it's not impossible. But it's absolutely necessary for our industry to remain competitive in the eyes of our viewers, as well as provide for potential new business opportunities. Nexstar intends to remain a leader in championing this transition. I'm an unabashed fan of local television. Now, some might say I have 6.4 billion new reasons to say that now, but that's besides the point. If our regulatory shackles are removed, local diversified media companies are uniquely positioned to thrive in today's multi-platform world and multi-screen world because we provide superior and preferred local content, and because we offer local businesses, advertisers, and brands unparalleled marketing opportunities across all devices and screens. Nexstar is a company that has been built on the principles of localism, innovation, and growth. Nexstar stands at the precipice of completing our transformative acquisition of Tribune Media, making us then the largest company in local television broadcasting. We take that responsibility seriously, to be a leader in our industry and in our communities, to do things the right way, and to do right by our viewers, our advertisers, our shareholders, and our employees. And on behalf of the more than 9,200 employees of the Nexstar Nation, thank you very much for your time today. I understand we're going to take a few questions. Anybody has one? Yes, sir.
Harry Rob Stoddard from NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Appreciated your comments on 3.0. I wondered if you could talk a little bit tactically about how the current and future Nexstar intends to roll it out, what the challenges and opportunities might be, and what we should look for in Nexstar.
Sure. Well, as you know, Nexstar, or you may know, Nexstar is the only group with a foot planted in the Pearl Consortium and the Spectrum Consortium, which are the two entities attempting to drive adoption and transition of 3.0. So we're participating both in the Phoenix test, and we will become the first 3.0 lighthouse in Phoenix with our station there, and we're participating in the Dallas test that involves Dish Network and Univision and building out an SFN network. At the NAB, you probably saw the announcement from Pearl and the Spectrum Consortium targeting another 40 markets that are ripe for the next conversion. The equipment piece of it is relatively easy. It is the transition piece that requires the roadmap of, leasing tower space for my 1.0 signal, being a lessor of tower space for somebody else's 3.0 signal. All those inter alia type agreements are what takes the time. But we think we are developing the learning, and we're developing a playbook that once we get the first couple of markets done, then we have a template that can apply to other markets. And obviously where you have members of the Spectrum Consortium or members of Pearl or both in a market that are like-minded, those are the markets more apt to be transitioned sooner as opposed to later. As I said, it's hard, but it's not impossible, and I think we'll prove that out. Most broadcasters, I think, are thinking long-term, are using the funds, reimbursement funds from the FCC as the seed corn for developing a 3.0 transition. So if the FCC is willing to pay for a tower climb and a CP antenna in the repack, I'll pay the extra $25,000, $50,000 for the VPOL antenna to be ready for ATSC 3.0. So I think most broadcasters that I talk to are taking the same approach of layering on top of the FCC's repack investment, our own investment to facilitate the transition.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Gary Arlen from Arlen Communications. There was a lot of talk at the NAB convention that there was so much attention to antitrust this year. You want to talk at all about that, why it's happening right now, what's the circumstances aside from your own situation? Why is the FCC?
Well, there have been.
Justice Department so furious about that.
I think my attorneys would advise me not to say that. But there are a lot of my attorneys in the room, so maybe it's I would tell you that, obviously most transactions go through an antitrust review. And there have been a fair number of transactions recently, so maybe there's just a heightened attention to antitrust as part of the regulatory review. And so I think it's just part of the regulatory process that those of us that would like transactions approved have to participate in. And we have a great deal of respect for the regulatory agencies. I think we are trying to come at our transaction, the way that works for us, and giving people not a lot that's controversial, and a lot of things they can say yes to, and hopefully nothing they feel they have to say no to. But that was our final outcome was driven in conversations with regulators along the way. So I see it as not a participatory process and a cooperative process to hopefully get to our desired outcome. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kelsey Griffiths from Law 360. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the interplay between the Nexstar Tribune deal and the timing of the FCC potentially addressing the national ownership cap.
Well, we have, I'm paid to be optimistic, but we are not counting on deregulation of the national ownership cap or loosening of that for purposes of closing the Tribune transaction. I'm selling some stations I wish I didn't have to sell, to comply with all the regulations, whether it's DOJ or FCC, in-market, FTC, HSR, out-of-market, national ownership cap. But we're keeping our eyes on the prize of closing the big transaction, and we are hopeful that downstream that there will be a loosening of the national ownership cap. I mean, as the chairman says in meetings that I've been in and probably been with, what if tomorrow only 39% of the country could get on Facebook? Do you think there'd be rioting in the streets? Probably would be. So why are we asymmetrically regulated and kept small when I would argue that you probably want a regulated industry with a local point of view to be the counterpoint to those that have unfettered access to the population? Yes, sir.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. Mr. Sook, at the NAB show, Gordon Smith brought up the issue of getting 3.0 into phone handsets, and he sort of presented it as a problem or an issue that could become a problem further. Do you have any strategy for getting phone makers to put 3.0 chips in their phones?
Not particularly. I think that if we find one and it becomes a competitive advantage, others will follow. I think it's going to really be a marketplace-led transition. And I think what we have to do as broadcasters with ATSC 3.0 is keep a very open mind as to what the highest and best use of that spectrum is. And some people think it's targeted advertising. I don't happen to think that's going to be as big as others do. And I would like to think that the highest and best use of that spectrum is something we haven't thought of yet. And so I think it's kind of like the baseball movie. We have to build it and then they will come, right? And so I think if we build enough infrastructure out that people say, okay, there is now a nationwide patchwork quilt of spectrum that I might be able to take advantage of. Could Netflix look at being the anchor tenant in the mall for being able to stream pretty much an unlimited stream of content to people's devices? Have had no conversations with Reed Hastings, but I'm just saying, we can sit here and spitball, and we've had task force like that at the NAB, and we came up with 24 potential uses of the spectrum, and all I know is that we're probably nowhere close to what the real use of the spectrum, because I think it will evolve as the technology evolves. So from our perspective, I think we have to make the investment. I don't want the NFL saying, why do my games look so much better on cable than they do over the air, because we haven't transitioned to 4K and we're still in high definition. And so we need to do this to serve our viewers, remain competitive as a viewing source with our viewers and advertisers. But I also believe that, being from Texas, I think that our ancillary spectrum opportunities are our mineral rights. And if you know anything about shale gas and shale oil, it took 20 years to figure out how to hydraulically frack and horizontally drill to monetize the asset. I don't think this will take 20 years, but I think it will be a process of discovery, exploration, and ultimately adoption. Yes?
Go ahead.
Okay. You're saying that the 78% proposal proposal that you guys have signed on to is the status quo. But isn't it true that would apply the discount to VHF stations as well? So wouldn't that be an increase for Nexstar? And how much would you benefit from VHF stations getting the 50% increase as well?
Well,
Or discount?
I don't want to get into the nuances of the NAB position, whether there is a UHF discount or a VHF discount. Let's treat all stations the same, and let's just put the cap at 78%, which is where it has been since 2004, that if you were a company starting out and you bought all UHF stations, that is your de facto national reach. So, we're saying that would be, obviously the market would like to have some certainty. Okay, is it 39% with or without the discount? What happens, in the next election and all of that? And I think if we just codify the status quo, and listen, we were one of the ones that filed for elimination of the national ownership cap. We think that is the only intellectually honest answer to the question when you look at all of the competition that we have in the marketplace. It has unfettered access. But through discussions, negotiation, and accommodation, there were those that filed for less than 100%. All of the members of the television board have come together unanimously in support of 78% being the position that the industry can coalesce behind. And so we think with that, we would like the FCC to codify that regulation, which is in effect no change from the theoretical status quo. Now, I couldn't get to 78% because I have some VHF stations. So yes, would that create additional cap room for me? Right, but it's not unlimited. It would create it for others. And some, there's an independent television group, a group of small market broadcasters came out in favor of this. They say it has no use to us, but we believe that we need to take a statesman-like role here, and this is a proper step in the right direction for the industry for it to remain competitive long-term. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Martha McGill of Politico. The DOJ is holding a workshop in May on television advertising. I'm wondering if you would comment on what you're hoping comes out of that discussion.
Well, I'm hoping that it is an acknowledgement that the market is not defined as we compete only with other television stations for viewers and advertisers. That hasn't been true since the 80s, and it's certainly not true today. So I think an acknowledgement of that, might allow, more in-market acquisition, but I think that'll be a long process. I mean, I think you'll have a workshop, and then maybe that will lead to, a study group that might lead to actually regulations changing at some point. But I mean, people ask for dubs of our commercials so they can run them on YouTube Live and Facebook and all this kind of stuff. So the thought that our medium is irreplaceable in today's environment is just not true. I see advertisers walk their dollars across the street. I see people, with screens in their hand, not watching my content. So again, all we're asking for is the opportunity to compete on a level playing field. And I think this is a great first step for the DOJ to acknowledge that perhaps the current regulations don't reflect the current realities. And so I applaud the DOJ for taking that first step.
Other questions? Harry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Anyone would like one, they're for sale in the gift shop. I'd be happy to get one to you. But thank you all very much for your time today.
Thank you. And we'll see you next month. Thank you all.